you can start with a notebook, and I think that would be the second method of writing in a kind of enum that I laid out earlier. The first method would be just picking up the pen and putting it to paper and writing in an almost inspired way without preparation, but things you've talked about with friends in your dormitory, perhaps, kind of the boarding school or the college way of going about it in a society of boys. That's historically the case. That would be the first writing method, naive manifesto. Number two, maybe due to some setback from the publication of the manifesto, you first write down your thoughts privately in a notebook. You want to prepare yourself a bit more for the big match. And then you go through the notes, you categorize them, you throw them into 3 or 4 categories, and you have a 4-part book. You don't select all of them, you rate them explicitly or implicitly with stars or numbers of exclamation points or just numbers. So that's an outline. And I would say that's the second method of writing. It involves some preparation, some scaffolding. And what will the third be? The third is where you give up on a thematic outline and you just write a book in chronological order, following the chronological order of the notebooks, and you select key notes in each of those notebooks and use them as prompts. You respond to the prompts and interpret the notes to draw out more of the meaning as you go forth. You're wondering, well, what did I think at all? Because you're struggling at this point to summarize your own thoughts, perhaps due to excess of inventory, perhaps also due to the difficulty of saying the thoughts in a way that's acceptable either to you, your conscience, or as you believe, due to persecution from the community, that you want to say things that are close to blasphemous, even if they're not really essential for your system, but you might mistake yourself as a kind of political prophet, when in fact the novelties of any that you have to share are more so syntactic, and that's about it when you boil them down to their essence. So that would be number 3. I've called that a collage, where you pick and choose notes from the notebooks and you just write books. You can write a book. So you have 5 notebooks. Okay, you have 5 parts. Name the parts after each notebook or album. And you select key naive thoughts, maybe even a poem here and there. Then you interpret it. You're both the producer and the critic, or you're both the poet and the critic in this method of writing. The downfall, one of the shortcomings of this method of writing, which is why we have a 4th method coming, is that you, unlike a mathematician, you're not really defining your terms. You're overly obsessed with the flow of the sentence, not to mention the flow of sound to sound. So you're not picking out key terms and asking, well, what does this word being really mean? This term reality, how would you actually fix it and indicate that, hey, reality is not necessarily a standalone concept. It's paired with not only illusion, a necessary opposite, but it's also a byproduct of the operation distinguishing, not to mention ranking, valuing, and devaluing, and so on. So the 4th method, I think, is the proposal to write a book only after you've assembled a personal dictionary of your key terms, maybe also pulled out your key linguistic functions, such as is more important than. Richard Feynman said the other day, direction is more important than speed. So the whither is more important than how fast, if you want to reduce it interrogatively. But what are the units of this importance? It's a comparison. So value is the implicit 3rd concept in this tweet. So that's one thing you do with the 4th method. You figure out your elements, kind of like a chemist. And does the fourth method really produce any great works? I don't know. I didn't get around to it. But the fifth method of writing a manuscript is to do a pre-processing phase where you review a great number of your notes in a process of spaced repetition. Why? So that you get third and fourth impressions, not just first and second. You have a deeper appreciation of the essential structure of the notes, what they're really trying to say. You spot equivalent notes with higher frequency as you do this activity. You also normalize your responses to similar but not the same notes. So you develop this machinery like interrogative criticism, saying, oh, well, this is a where, this is a how much. So they're equivalent thoughts. You also tightly consider the concepts that are invoked as singletons or as monads. So you engage deeply in numerical criticism, and you start to think, well, if I have a term, how important is its definition or definitions? I also have its interrogative genesis, its number or its number type. Is it a monad or is it a poly concept or kind of a hybrid with a main member, but other branded members of less importance because they have names? And this is an example of the process. Its application is the fifth method of preparation for a book. The first method of preparation was just no preparation. So ideally, we would take something from each of the five methods and maybe come up with a sixth, or maybe just do something entirely different. Long answer to how do I review my notes today? Is it a great system? No, probably not, because it generates a lot more inventory in the comments. And this application, as you can see, if I go to individual note, you can't actually pick out the terms or the linguistic functions. So there's some more work to do. But it has achieved, for the most part, the normalization of how I respond to a note as though it's a request, so that if I were to write some artificial intelligence, I could write a processor between the seemingly myriad different requests and the responses. I want to have a few standard responses so that I can answer the question, how do I think? What do I think? What does this person think? What's the limit to distinct, interesting thoughts he could achieve in his lifetime, given his genetic code? And then we're done with philosophy. Great. You can focus on other things like making money. Talk to you later.